on your show.
Thank you, Bill. Where do you live?
I currently live in Rockford, Illinois, about an hour northwest of Chicago.
You know, Bill, I'm listening to your accent. That's not a Chicago accent. You're from New York City, aren't you?
Yeah, I usually greet my people that I talk to with a "How you doing?"
Yeah, how you doing? You grew up. I know this much that you grew up in Spanish Harlem. Most of us from other parts of the country, we just know that by name. Tell us what it was like to grow up in that part of the great city of New York.
Well, I did grow up in Uptown Manhattan, right in the middle of Spanish Harlem, which bordered Black Harlem. And in that neighborhood was a small little Italian community where my mom raised me and my two sisters by herself because my dad left when I was 6 months old, and I never got to see my dad. My mom was a great mom. She did the best that she could. But in a place like that, basically the streets of New York City raised me. And because my dad wasn't Italian, I got picked on a lot by the Italian guys in the neighborhood. I was I like to call myself a half-breed. And I was always in situations where I was fighting for my life. It was a very dangerous neighborhood. And there were a lot of what I like to call FROA people there. We call them future racketeers of America, as well as real mafia guys, dangerous hit guys. And I went through a series of events when I was 12 years old that really shaped the pattern of behavior for who I was going to be for the first 36 years of my life. Events like walking into a hallway one day and a grown-up man meeting me there at knife point and sexually assaulting me, and there was nothing I could do about it. I was just 12, and I'll never forget the words that he said when he was done. He said, "If you tell anyone, I'll kill you and I'll kill your family." And I know he meant it because he was a made hit guy for the mafia. And out of fear, I told no one. And I can't tell you the amount of shame and guilt that overwhelmed me, not to mention the identity crisis that I had. I didn't know who I was. And not to mention the pain that I packed away that started growing inside of me like an emotional cancer. There was also another guy that approached me. His name was Johnny, and this was probably the most feared guy in the neighborhood. There's no telling how many people he killed before he died at the age of 23, and he told me to take a $100 bill and go into a building where a couple of guys were going to give me a package and some change. So now I'm doing drug deals at 12 years old because I couldn't tell this guy no, and I get the job done. About a week later, it tells me to do it again, and when I gave those guys that money, they quickly realized I gave them a counterfeit $100 bill, and immediately two guns were drawn on me, and I knew I was going to die, but for some reason, both guns wouldn't go off. I could still see both fingers on both triggers, and I know that God had a plan for my life.
Talking to Bill Rieser, and Bill spells his name Rieser. We found out about Bill's story through his book. It's called Vertical Leap: How Jesus Changed New York City Basketball Legend Bill Rieser. Vertical Leap is the title of his story that he's telling us in part about today, and it's published by Moody. And available, I guess, everywhere now, Bill?
It's available everywhere. You can get it anywhere online or my website.
Okay.
Bill, how'd you get into basketball? Because that's one thing, that was one step along the way that changed your life.
Well, I quickly realized that I could play the game of basketball. I could jump really high. I had a 44-inch vertical leap, which means I could jump out of the gym. Wow. And I could do anything with a basketball. And basketball was going to be my ticket out in New York City. Basketball was going to be my ticket out of a lifestyle of drugs and alcohol. You see, to numb the pain in my life of the sexual abuse, the abandonment of a father, getting into life-threatening situations, I resorted to drugs, alcohol, womenizing, and my life was always out of control. I would never really have a handle on it, but basketball was my ticket out of it. Those that saw me play knew that I was not only going to be one of the best players ever to come out of New York City, but I was going to be one of the top players ever to play in the NBA. I was destined, that was going to be my destiny, and that was the only thing that mattered to me. I actually went to Benjamin Franklin High School, where I was one of 4 white kids out of 2,500 black and Puerto Rican students, but I was the man because of basketball. Basketball gave me opportunities to do things that I could have never done. I was able to go to the west side of Harlem. Now, not a lot of people know this, but if you're white, growing up back in the 60s and 70s, you could never go to the west side of Harlem. But because people knew who I was and I had a reputation for being one of the top street ball legends of all time, I could walk the streets of Harlem. So when you hear stories that Bill Clinton walked the streets of Harlem, he lied. Trust me, he never walked those streets. But I did, and basketball was my ticket out of New York City. It was going to be my claim to fame, and that's all I knew.
We're talking about now. When were your high school years?
Well, I graduated Benjamin Franklin High School in 1978, so we're talking 74 to 78.
Okay. You were playing high school ball, and you were playing on the streets of New York. And now, did you get recruited by what colleges did you?
Well, I actually got recruited by every Division I university in the country. And I didn't realize it, but my high school coach was telling them that I wasn't interested in attending their university. Schools like UCLA and Notre Dame and Purdue and Louisville. And I could have went anywhere I wanted to go to in the country, but I wound up going to a school in Shreveport, Louisiana called Centenary College, where Robert Parrish from the Celtics played. Due to the influence of my high school coach, and it was also my final decision. I had a good year playing as a freshman, and about a week before my sophomore season, I was out drinking like I normally do. I actually fell out of a tree, busted my knee, and I never recovered from that knee injury.
A tree?
Yeah, actually a tree. I mean,
what were you doing in a tree?
Well, in order to get to a party, you had to climb a tree to get to this party. Listen to the ignorance and the stupidity and the insanity that I lived my life. I mean, not taking any responsibility, not owning up to anything that I ever did. I was a prideful kid. I had a self-entitled mindset. I never got along with my coaches. I thought the world owed me. And I just had a bad attitude, and I was a wild partier. I was just crazy, out of control. I mean, at one point, I remember doing so much cocaine at my sister's wedding that I lost my eyesight for a week.
So you just thought yourself, "Hey, I'm the basketball king, and so I'm just going to act the way I want to, and I get special treatment."
Well, Bill, they called you the White Jesus, right?
Well, because as they said, I could do miracles with a basketball in my hand. You always get a nickname
Sure.
when
Right.
you play basketball in New York City. They call it an AKA, also known as. And my nickname, because as they said, I could do things with a basketball in my hand, was White Jesus. So I used to play in the famous Rucker Park on the west side of New York City, where some of the greatest basketball players in the world played. Guys like Joe Hammond, Pookie Wilson, and the Herman Helicopter. I mean, great basketball players. Julius Erving. I mean, all these great ball players played there. And that's where I got the nickname. Earl the Pearl Monroe, who was one of my favorite legends of all time, played for the New York Knicks. His nickname in New York City was called Black Jesus because of the miracles he could do with a basketball.
We're talking to Bill Rieser, Rieser. His book is called Vertical Leap, How Jesus Changed New York City Basketball Legend Bill Rieser. All right, what happened to you? You blow your knee out falling out of a tree in college in Louisiana on a basketball scholarship, and then what happens to you?
Well, they were asking me to play before I was 100% healthy, and I actually had a pro agent at the time, and he convinced me to go back home to New York City and then transfer to Eastern Kentucky University, another Division I school. He knew the head coach there, and I would sit out a year and play 2 years, my junior and senior year, and the plan was to get drafted from Eastern Kentucky University, and I'd be on my track. I'd be on my way to playing in the NBA. But history would repeat itself again my junior and senior year as I would suffer injuries the week of those seasons where it would put me out for about 12 weeks at a time, and it just decimated my college career. Plus the coach that I went to go play for left. A new coach came in. He didn't like me. I didn't like him. Again, my prideful, self-entitled mindset. You see, I thought I was invincible, and I was never humble enough to ever let God lead my life. And so I was just a troubled kid.
What happened?
I left after Eastern Kentucky, I was so devastated from my college basketball career going down the tubes that I didn't touch a basketball for almost 3 years. But I met a girl at Eastern Kentucky University, and her name was Carolyn, and we started dating. And after college, we decided to move to New York City, and we immediately decided to get married. And we got married in Kentucky, where her family is from. She's actually from the mountains of Kentucky. Matter of fact, her grandmother is a Hatfield from the Hatfields and McCoys. And so God's got a sense of humor. He hooked up a guy from Harlem with a Hatfield. That could be in a pretty explosive situation.
That's terrific. Okay.
And so we got married, but my family was never a priority to me. Basketball was. Even when Carolyn gave birth to my daughter 25 years ago, my family wasn't a priority because after 3 years of not touching a basketball, I picked up a ball, and 2 weeks later I'm playing in all the pro tournaments in New York City, and I'm starting to make a comeback. And then I suffered another injury that my doctors told me I could never play basketball ever again. And to manage that pain, I take my drug use and drinking to a whole new level. And out of all the things that hurt me, nothing hurt more than the final realization that my NBA career was over. And you see, the problem with me was when you don't take personal responsibility for your own life, you tend to blame the ones you love the most. And I blame my family for my own personal failures because I didn't want to take a look at myself. And so I was just sinking deeper, and my life is completely out of control. And I started looking for acceptance in the wrong places. And one day I had a conversation with a person I should have never had a conversation with. That was a female. That led to an affair, which led to other affairs. But while all this is going on and my life is completely out of control, and I think no one knows about it, God is drawing my wife back to him. She gave her life to Christ when she was a teenager, but she would tell you that she walked away from it when she started dating me and when we were married. But you see, we can never walk away from Christ. See, Christ will chase us down, and he started chasing Carolyn down, and she recommitted her life to Christ, and she felt led to move to Kentucky to raise our daughter. And I thought that running would be the answer for us. But you see, the problem with running to Kentucky was I would still be there. And when I got to Kentucky, I found new people to get high with, new people to get drunk with, and I found new people to have affairs with. But something shifted and something changed when we got to Kentucky.
Well, we've got about 7 or 8 minutes. What do you want to tell us about what the Lord God has done in your life?
Well, Carolyn started asking people to pray for me, and obviously when God gets involved, things are going to come to a head. And here's what God did in my life. You see, God used my wife to make me realize that he loved me despite me, because Carolyn walked in on a conversation that I was having with one of the girls that I was having an affair with. In 1 second, my whole life was exposed, and the only thing that I knew is that we were done. My marriage was over. She would never forgive me. And then we had a meeting to talk about the divorce, but she had a pastor pray for her before that meeting that God would give her peace that surpasses all understanding. And she can tell you on the drive home where the peace of God came into her car and basically took it away from her, because when she walked through the door that night, it wasn't my wife. She had a peace and a calm about her that I've never seen, and here's what she said. She said, "Bill, God would never give up on you, and I'm not going to give up on you. And God can forgive you for anything that you've ever done. And so can I." And to this day, she's never held me hostage to my past life. She said, "I don't know if I could ever forget, but I'm willing to give it a try if you're willing to give your life to Jesus Christ." Now, gentlemen, at that moment, I knew that that was God calling me home. And at that moment, I saw my whole life pass before me, and I saw where God was there pursuing me, loving me, protecting me. And that night, I asked Jesus Christ to be the Lord and leader of my life. And the only thing I told God that night was, "Lord, I'll do anything you want me to do, just as long as I know it's you." And the only thing that made sense to me from that day moving forward was to run that hard to God as I ran from God for the first 36 years of my life. And what I want to tell you is that since that night, over 15 years ago, God has made the difference in my life. He has set me free from every addiction, every hurt, every habit. He's healed my marriage. We just celebrated 28 years of marriage, because when the Son of God sets you free, you are free indeed. And knowing Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life, has made my life a miracle in the making. You're listening to One Satisfied Customer.